Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the Ascended Spiritual Warrior. Today's fascinating near-death experience comes from a woman named Natalie who experienced a roadside bombing that led to a remarkable account of healing and spiritual wisdom. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. I appreciate you being here. These videos are meant to build faith in a world that seems to be faithless and to prove that there is life on the other side. If you enjoy these videos, then please click the like, subscribe, and bell icon so you'll get notified of any new out-of-body experience and near-death experience stories we upload. For our return viewers, you know what to do. Grab a beverage, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. I had just closed my eyes, hand propping up my head, elbow on the door handle. It was the end of a long day of construction site visits and now only a few minutes out from base. I'd long ago quit paying attention to what was passing by outside the window and had lost track of how far we were from the rest of our security convoy. This personal security team seemed to travel a half a kilometer or more of road between wagons, and I hadn't seen the Iraqi police escort for a while. Not knowing the two security men in the front seats well, I hadn't chatted with them. The team was running on a closed mic. As a passenger, I'd hit the familiar point of being artificially lulled into boredom. I was in the truck, head on hand, half asleep, and then I was not. The roadside bomb went off. I'll call this instantaneous movement blinking from one place to another, for lack of a better word. In this new environment, I stood on an oval dais, looking rather intrepid in my bloody and torn fatigues, slouching a bit, dirty and darkly tan, addressing thousands of white-robed beings or personalities. They were arrayed up and all around me as I stood in the center of a huge stadium, the dais on which I stood being perhaps 20 feet in diameter. The personalities were non-physical in essence, taking on form if they intended to do that for a particular purpose. I perceived the way they looked according to what I preferred for my purposes. At the time, since I had been abruptly transferred from the physical plane, it was simpler to perceive them in a human form, wearing glowing white robes. Most of these thousands were familiar to me, and all were my equal, regardless of their admiration for my latest silly feat on Earth. How intrepid is it, really, to choose to be blown up? I knew the gathering to be a meeting of many groups representing a wide variety of interests and responsibilities pertaining not only directly to Earth and physical universe energies, but to dimensions and issues beyond. The issue that I first communicated was that I was tired and had no interest in returning to the physical plane. I understood that the decision was mine, and at that point, my decision was to end my physical existence. Immediately after that, or perhaps more accurately, folded within it, I presented what seems from my current physical body conscious mind perception to be a transfer of information in the form of an inexplicably complex matrix. The information was minutely detailed and broadly conceptual. It was at once layered and infinitely dense, yet elegantly simple. It included events, thoughts, incidents, individuals, and groups in all their relationship complexities, stories, concepts, connections, nuances, layers, judgments, and projections. It included kinetic equations, dimensions, symbols, and flows. Rather than being a classic life-flashing before the eyes scene, this download was a collection that emphasized what might be very broadly understood as cultural and political information. I was aware that I deliberately offered the condensed data in fulfillment of a request that had been made by this gathering of personalities prior to my taking on this body for this physical lifetime. While the personalities digested the matrix I'd made available, I was again amused by the admiration that was sent back to me. They were clearly impressed not only with my Raiders of the Lost Ark appearance, but also by the depth and breadth of information I was providing. Yet I perceived the task as an easy one and the information obvious, therefore unworthy of admiration. When the thought form or matrix had been absorbed by everyone, which took but seconds, discussions proceeded among the various groups and within the whole of the gathering. This may seem impossible, considering there were thousands present, but it was not. No overlaps occurred, no interruptions took place, no misunderstandings formed, and disagreements were respectfully and thoughtfully engaged and resolved. All communication was accomplished through thought. They then requested that I return to my physical body to accomplish some further work. I was given to understand that my particular skills with energy were needed at this time and would be effective only were I actually present in a body within the earth vibration. I replied that I was willing, but given my level of exhaustion and disinterest in the difficulties of this particular physical life to date, I requested that certain assistance be provided within that continued physical existence. While we all digested some details, I retreated to a deep place that I'll refer to as another vibrational dimension, for lack of a better description, where I could recuperate and restore my energies. Other beings assisted with this, doing most of the work while I entered a sort of spiritual deep resting state. From the physical perspective, this state lasted an equivalent of centuries within less than a moment. When I returned to the gathering, we agreed upon specific tasks that I would accomplish and specific things that they would assist me with once I was back in the physical. This wasn't a barter exchange, as we might assume from our cultural perspective. It was more of a genuinely easy granting of services with no weight placed on the value or relative cost of effort implied by each agreement. Having agreed, I moved to another vibrational location where healing would be performed on my physical body. From this location, I could see my physical body in the truck, head propped up by my right hand, elbow resting on the door handle exactly as I'd left it. I could also see my body as an energy matrix. Reading from both those levels simultaneously, I could tell that my right hand was nearly severed at the wrist, my right foot and ankle were badly mangled, and I had a deep wound in my right torso. There was a large hole in my head. I was missing one eye, the frontal sinus, and a portion of my brain. Some energy beings and I worked together, quickly repairing the body, primarily working through the matrix. The injuries weren't entirely healed, as some were to be of use in situating me for tasks I had agreed to perform or things that I wanted to experience as a whole infinite self. While we worked, we joked with each other about what should and shouldn't be done and casually engaged in a great deal of goofing off. When we had finished, I thanked my companions and then I moved to another location that served as a convenient jump-off point. There I met briefly with some other beings that were familiar to me. We discussed mechanical details of what I'd agreed to do for the gathering, as well as some personal issues. Then I simply took a deep breath and popped back into my body. All I heard was a pop, the sound of a champagne cork from 100 meters, the Microsoft sound of opening a new window, finger snap from across the office. I vividly remember taking a long, deep breath, more of a sigh that echoed an internal sigh. I was tired inside, exhausted. I wanted to rest. I opened my eyes. I wasn't able to see out of my right eye, the one my hand had been covering as I'd settled for a short nap. My left eye was fine. I let both hands rest on my thighs. Both were covered with blood. I lifted my right hand back up to cover my eye. The inside of the Land Cruiser was charred-looking, smoked with powder burns or whatever it is in an IED that causes that black, toasted look. There was blood all over. I looked over at Ben, my colleague, and said his name at the same time I noticed a hole in his thigh. The femoral artery should have been there, I was sure, but he wasn't bleeding. Perhaps the hole had missed the artery, I thought, even knowing that was impossible. Ben moaned loudly. We all sat straight in our seats, then the vehicle rolled straight down the road, and after Ben stopped moaning, it was dead silent. The truck rolled for what felt like a couple 100 meters, then made a perfect and silent turn to the right, rolling off the road onto a clear area of sandy dirt. I didn't see Ian, our driver, move, but it was such perfect control that he must have been conscious and steering. The truck stopped. I put my right hand back down on my leg and studied it again. The skin was completely shredded on the little finger and ring finger. The skin was all there, just poked with holes like a Parmesan cheese grater's surface. The other fingers weren't so bad, though the whole hand was bloody. It felt as if that took a long time, and now when I relived the moment, it was slow and leisurely. It felt important to take in what things looked like and sounded like, to assess the state of this new environment. In addition to the eye and hand, my trouser legs were soaked in blood, though I couldn't see any holes in the fabric. My legs and feet felt fine, and they were still there. I optimistically made the assumption that the blood came from one of the others. I pushed myself off the console, turned and sat back into my seat. I leaned back and looked out the window. An Iraqi face appeared at the gun port on Ben's side, which had had its cover blown out. The man was in uniform, one of our Iraqi police escorts. His eyes were huge when they met mine. "Help!" he shouted, turning his head toward the back of our vehicle as he did. So the team is pulling up behind us, I thought. He looked at me with those huge, frightened eyes and then disappeared. I looked down at my legs again. BDUs covered with blood. I lowered my right hand and looked at it, skin chopped off on my fingers. I heard a shout and Ben's door jerked open. Jack appeared, leaning in to look at us. I think other men from the team came then, behind Jack. My door was pulled open. "You okay, Nat?" Jack asked. "I'm okay," I told him. "Let's see your eye," he said. "Move your hand." I lowered my right hand and watched his expression, which didn't change. I thought that was probably not a good thing, but he didn't toss cookies and he didn't start yelling, so maybe the eye itself was still there. Finding out wasn't a priority, and I immediately moved on mentally. Jack reached out and plucked the remains of the rim of my sunglasses out of my brow. It felt as if it had been imprinted into my numb skin when he plucked it out. "Okay," he said, handing me a bandage. "Hold this over it." I held the bandage against my face, and he helped me out of the truck. When I put weight on my right foot, I stumbled, pain stabbing up through my heel. "Okay," he asked again. "Okay," I told him, "it's just my right heel." I hopped, keeping weight only on the toe of the right boot. It didn't hurt that way. He helped me to the center of the ring of trucks and told me to lie down on the ground, take my helmet off. I lay down on the ground, took my helmet off. I rested my head back against the dirt and relaxed, wondering where everyone else was. A few minutes passed before someone came to get me, told me to come with him. The man helped me hop to the Land Cruiser and he placed me in the back seat. For some reason, Jack was the only man that I recognized during this whole event. The only team member I remember speaking to aloud after I'd spoken Ben's name as we'd rolled silently down the road just after the blast. Ian was sitting beside me in the truck they'd moved me into. It felt as if we sat there for a long time. Now I think it was 5 minutes, not much more, and maybe less. The radio was on open mic. We've got too superficial, too critical, someone said. I remember thinking Mark is the other critic. Correction, too superficial, one critical, the voice almost immediately stated, and I knew Mark had died. I don't know why I knew it was Mark. It could have been Ben, couldn't it? His femoral artery was gone, but I knew it was Mark. I wondered if I'd been blind in my right eye. I wondered if there was some advantage to that. Maybe if one eye was physically blind, it would allow me to see other worlds more clearly. I got a little thrill thinking that, but then thought that I could probably do both, as I often had, see other worlds and see the physical world out of that eye, and that's what I wanted. Jack opened the front door of the truck Ian and I sat in. We heard the helicopter pass over us. I think I remember hearing the pilot's voice on the radio. Things started moving. Jack jumped back out of the truck, and I could see men running and dust clouds billowing outside the window. Within a few minutes, the door beside me opened, and 2 men helped me out of the truck, pulling my arms over their shoulders. They ran me to the helicopter, where a medic reached out to help me aboard. I was laid on a stretcher in the helicopter.